these books really hit me hardcore at a point in my life where I felt like it was a perfect storm to set me up for the growth that I needed, the healing that I needed, and the progress that I wanted. Hey there, class kickers. This is Brian with the Kick Some Class podcast, and this is the show designed to help you, the educator, kick some class at home, in school, and in life. And if you are a teacher that's just starting out, or you could be a grizzled veteran that's trying not to burn out, this is the show that's designed to help you with tips, tricks, tutorials, the occasional rant conversations, and today a couple of book recommendations that can help you have a greater impact in your class, at home, and in life. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so in the last year, I have just been devouring books on all sorts of topics with education and marketing and business and all that other good stuff. Well, there are a couple that go back a little further than that have had a dramatic impact on me as a teacher and just as a human being. And I really thought it might be worthwhile sharing those with you. So, a lot of you have heard my story in some of these episodes before, and I talk about how the birth of my daughter late in life really changed my perspective on how I wanted to live and all of those awesome things that kind of come along with it. And I talk often about how I don't view this as a midlife crisis because I kind of view it as a gift. Well, one of the things that caused my wife and I to do is to dive into things about parenting that we, obviously now needed to talk about. And so one of those, I'm going to share this one with you first, which I think is really powerful, is called Boundaries. And this particular book we had been through once before with a group of adults talking about boundaries in our life that maybe were or were not established by our parents. So when Addie was born or on her way, this book right here sort of came back to our memory and was like, okay, let's go back through that again and talk about the boundaries we want to set for our daughter. And then that spills over, as I talk about the overflow principle all the time. That spills over into our work, that spills over into our marriage, that spills over into our friends and all that other good stuff. And so we picked up this as sort of a 2-for-1 to start things off, boundaries with kids. And so if you have kids, I say this in the beginning of every episode that, my goal is to help you maximize your impact at home, in school, and in life. And I may switch the order of those things up, but the point is that if you have a greater impact with your children, if you have kids, then that's a win, right? Regardless of what happens in your job, if you're at the end of this road of parenting, that your kids are happy, healthy, successful, and moving forward, I think we're doing something right. And we may still have challenges in the classroom. We may still have personal struggles. I think that's just normal to expect those things, but to know that we made an influence on our kids and set them up for success, where they can then move on and tackle the challenges they face in life, I think is really, really powerful. And so these two books by Cloud and Townsend really set that up. Now, it is written from a spiritual perspective in a lot of things, a lot of ways. So if that's not something you're in for, I still think the value of these books is right on. And if that's not you, go ahead and ignore that. But for me, that was sort of a double whammy. It hit me in my spiritual life, but it also helped me, in my marriage and all those things with setting proper boundaries. That's one I talk about a lot. The second one I'm actually going to skip down to is Grit by Angela Duckworth. And I talked about this in a previous episode with this mean tweet person who I won't dignify. But this book really, really challenged me in the sense of forcing productive struggle and creating instances of failure. So, Carl Hooker just wrote this book about fail, Ready, Set, Fail, and be having him on the podcast soon as well. But this idea of failure and grit go hand in hand. If we are spoon feeding, if we're doing everything for them, if we're only allowing our students, our children, ourselves to engage in those things that we're good at, that we like, that we know we're going to be successful, that's a recipe for failure, right? We're actually cultivating an avoidance mentality of those places where we need to grow. So having this idea of grit, I think, is super powerful. If you want to, see my mini rant where I went on, go ahead and check out this episode that I talked about with grit and coming across this tweet. And yeah, so anyway, I think that's a really great book. Angela Duckworth, Grit. Would love the scientific end of how that all works. This next one is, if you have seen any of my stuff, I love Seth Godin. Now, Seth Godin is a marketing guy. But in this book, Linchpin, he writes about the shifts in our culture from the Industrial Revolution to the information or knowledge economy that we live in now, and how our society was churning out people like cogs in a machine that could step into a factory and be a good worker in a factory. What I find interesting about that as an educator is our educational system was really meant for that as well. That there's a standard education, a standardized education that's designed for a factory economy. We no longer live in a factory economy. So, a factory economy, if one worker gets sick, well, that's fine. We just bring in a replacement. Now, if anybody has ever put in plans for a substitute, you know that there is no replacement in the classroom for you. You have to build that relationship with students. You know where they're coming from. You know where they are in different levels, what they need, all that stuff. So, as a professional, you know that in your classroom, you're a linchpin. If you are pulled out, then things are not going to be as effective. And so, this book, Linchpin, is really about setting yourself up to be indispensable because of the type of person you are. Now, for me, this is a really, really powerful book in the sense of education and my own life, in that I want to be indispensable. I want to have a set of skills, personality, branding, way that I work with people that makes me different from every other person. And so, if I fit the need for the problem that you have, then there is no reason in looking anywhere else, right? And so, if that's the mentality that we have as professionals, as educators, as human beings, it can be really powerful. Now, I do one-on-one coaching with people. I do group coaching, do all sorts of stuff. And the reason that I started this podcast is because there were a following of people that were like, hey, your unique flavor of professional development or whatever that might be, I like. And this is the cool part for me. There is nothing behind this to say, if I'm not for you, great, but find somebody who is, and that person had better be a linchpin that fits you. So that's a great book. Recommend that one. And I left this one for last because this one, this is gonna sound kind of 80s ish. This one here kind of rocked my party. So I was reading this during COVID, and I talk about this often, and I probably should get some type of royalties or something. I don't know, affiliate marketing for how often I push this book on other people. But if you're into minimalism or have seen anything with minimalism, this is essentially a minimalism applied to your life. That if you could boil down exactly what you want out of life, exactly what matters to you, exactly the few things that you want to choose to make the greatest impact in your life and with your life, they are the essentials. And so the basic principle of this is, as he says right here on the cover, the disciplined pursuit of less. And I began to realize during the initial COVID shutdown that my life was actually happier with less. Because the things that I had were my family. If you recall, when we first shut down in 2020, it was like people weren't even supposed to leave their homes, right? During the first couple of weeks, was really very much almost like a lockdown, and it may have been more or less so where you happen to be. But I was home working remotely with my wife and daughter here. We had the food in the house. It was us. We were spending time as a family. We were doing the things that mattered. We'd established a different routine in those first couple, weeks. And things are just like we're going on walks with one another. We're having meals together. We're spending a lot more time together. And it kind of made me realize that the things that I was reading and studying to feed me intellectually, the things that I was doing socially in my family and with those that mattered, made a lot of other things fall away. And this book hit me at a perfect time where I could look at what was essential in my life, what I wanted to do with my life. And then as I sort of picked some of those other things away, I think that burnout that a lot of people experience began to heal. This book for me is probably the main reason why I started this podcast, why I renewed my YouTube channel, why I'm writing this book, why I started the website Class Kickers, like the new T-shirt. But the goal in all of this was I knew that I could take my experience. This is what teachers do, and help someone else. And this time, it wasn't going to be a student in my class. It was going to be those teachers that are out there doing what I'm doing and experiencing those same battle scars and difficulties and challenges. If I could get through and find peace in my life, find balance in my life, find health for myself, then I would be incredibly selfish to not share that. So these books really hit me hardcore at a point in my life where I felt like it was a perfect storm to set me up for the growth that I needed, the healing that I needed, and the progress that I wanted. And they're awesome. So I share those with you guys again. Hey, well, if you pick up one of these books, I would love it if you would drop me a comment, whether it's on this video on YouTube, whether it's at kicksomeclass.com, or maybe on the podcast. Just tell me which one of the books that you picked up, if you've read one of these, if you picked one up because of this video, and what did you get out of it? What did you think? What challenged you? What encouraged you? What brought a strength or a change in your life? I'd love to hear that. Go ahead and hit me with the hashtag #KickSomeClass on Twitter as well. Maybe snap a picture of you with the book or whatever. And if there's somebody else that you know could benefit from this podcast or has read one of these books and recommended it, share this with them, and we can all encourage one another. So I hope that was helpful. I hope it helps you kick some class, and I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.